We all know the Sofia Coppola aesthetic, but we rarely talk about where it actually came from. Growing up on her father's film sets and interning at Chanel gave Sofia a perspective no other director has. She spent 30 years proving that pretty isn't just a look, it's a language. Critics often dismiss her work as just an aesthetic. But Sofia has always known that mood is a plot point. Today we're looking at how she turned a soft focus lens into a career-defining philosophy. But first, let's look at Sofia's childhood. She described it as being like an army brat, but instead of moving between military bases, she was moving between some of the most legendary film sets in history. She was born in New York City in May of 1971, the youngest child and only daughter in a large artistic family. Her father, film director Francis Ford Coppola, was the centre of the cinematic universe at the time, and her mother Eleanor was a conceptual artist who captured the quiet side of the chaos. Sofia grew up surrounded by her brothers and a literal dynasty of cousins like actors Nicolas Cage and Jason Schwartzman. But being the only girl in that very loud, very masculine circle was an important factor. Her normal was nomadic, as Sofia moved frequently according to her father's shooting schedules, whether it was the chaos of the Philippines for Apocalypse Now or the sets of The Outsiders. Her dad made sure Sofia was always there. She was the quiet, observant kid tucked away in the corner of the frame. She watched movies being made, and her reality was the production. This is where she learned that a movie isn't just a story, but an entire world you build from the ground up. In the summer of 1986, a 15-year-old Sofia headed to Paris for an internship at the luxury fashion house Chanel. The opportunity was set up by a family friend, Carol Bouquet, and it really couldn't have come at a more crucial time. After the sudden loss of her brother Giancarlo, that summer in Paris became a vital creative refuge. It was a masterclass in detail, as she wasn't just learning about fashion. She was watching how a specific atmosphere is built from the ground up. This was where she realised that the right fabric, lighting, or even how silence could communicate things that words just can't reach. And looking back, it's such a perfect full circle moment. Decades later, that relationship with the house evolved from a teenage intern fetching coffee to Sofia becoming one of Chanel's most vital creative voices. And she often brought that signature Coppola family energy to the brand, frequently collaborating with her brother, Roman. Together, they've directed several high-profile films for Chanel that feel more like cinematic art than traditional ads. You might have seen their work on the Cruise 2023 collection in Monaco, which felt like a nostalgic mosaic of French glamour, or their playful campaign for the Chanel 19 bag, featuring the beautiful actress Margaret Qualley. Sofia's also handled solo tributes like her gorgeous video collage for the Mademoiselle Privé exhibition in Tokyo. It was a dreamy, hand-stitched homage to Gabrielle Chanel that combined archival footage with modern muses. And I've actually linked those videos in the description below. They are definitely worth a watch if you want to see how she translates her film style into fashion. And recently in 2025, Sofia returned to the very same archives where she worked as a teen to edit a massive visual history book called Chanel Haute Couture. She spent months sifting through unseen sketches and photographs, essentially curating the legacy of the place that helped raise her. But back in the 80s, Sofia was also growing up in front of a camera lens, and she popped up in a number of her father's films with her own stage name Domino Coppola. In The Outsiders, she had a tiny blink and you'll miss it role as a little girl who approaches the greasers at the Dairy Queen asking for 15 cents. And in Rumblefish, at age 11, she played Donna, the younger sister to Patty, played by Diane Lane. And if you go back and watch Peggy Sue Got Married, she shows up in flashback scenes as Nancy Kelcher, the younger sister to Kathleen Turner's character. But everything changed in 1990 when she stepped in to play Mary Corleone in The Godfather Part 3. The backlash was instant and incredibly personal. Critics were brutal, dismissing her as a nepo baby before that term even really existed. For most, that kind of public rejection would be a reason to quit. For Sofia, it was a pivot as she realised she didn't want to be the one the world was looking at. She wanted to be the one controlling the gaze. She wasn't a failed actress, she was an observer who had finally found her perspective. And as she entered her 20s, she was about to take that perspective underground. By the early 90s, Sofia had traded her father's massive film sets for the grainy, lo-fi energy of the California indie scene. This was her DIY decade, a period of creative play that served as her real film school. It all started in 1994 with her TV show High Octane, and I personally really enjoyed watching it back in the day. It was this short-lived, chaotic show on Comedy Central that Sofia co-hosted with her friend Zoe Cassavetes. It felt less like a professional production and more like a video-zine. The show's range was wild. 1 minute, they'd be interviewing Keanu Reeves on the side of the street, or filming monster truck rallies. And the next, they'd cut to a segment called Thurston's Alley, where their friend Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth would host these surreal, lo-fi interviews, even sitting down with people like Anna Wintour. It was this perfect mix of grainy, amateurish charm and high culture access. It was cool, and it was messy, proving that Sofia had her finger on a pulse that was entirely her own. She was blending the underground with the elite, long before it became a trend. During this same time, she was carving out her own space in fashion. She helped her friend Kim Gordon of Sonic Youth to launch the iconic label X-Girl, even producing a legendary guerrilla fashion show right on a Soho sidewalk. I've actually made a full video on this X-Girl show, and I've linked it in the description below. The Milkfed aesthetic was simple. It featured iconic baby tees, printed with slogans like Wasted, or images of figures like Steve McQueen and Che Guevara. It wasn't about being high fashion or catering to a male audience. She was designing for the girls, focusing on the quiet, unpolished beauty of everyday life. Between her fashion lines and her time at CalArts, Sofia was learning to tell stories without a script. She realised she could communicate an entire emotion through the choice of a song or the texture of a slip dress. She was no longer just a Coppola, she was a curator of cool. And she was about to take that vision to the big screen. It was in 1998 when Sofia was ready for her first feature, The Virgin Suicides. After reading Jeffrey Eugenides' novel, she felt the themes of loss and teenage heartache were taken straight from her own psyche. When Sofia heard that a male director was developing a dark and vengeful version of the story, she felt a sudden, protective urge toward the book. She didn't see it as a dark thriller. She wanted the film to be beautiful, light, and even funny, qualities she felt were essential to the story. Sofia wanted to create something artful for girls that actually respected its audience. She felt most movies at the time completely failed to capture the reality of being a teenage girl. Feeling like she had no choice but to tell this story herself, she actually began writing the screenplay as an exercise before she even owned the film rights. The story itself is told through the eyes of a group of neighbourhood boys, looking back on the 5 mysterious Lisbon sisters who lived on their street in the 1970s. It's a hazy, suburban tragedy where the sisters are kept in strict isolation by their overprotective parents. As the boys obsess over the girls from a distance, the film becomes a haunting meditation on the mystery of girlhood and the collective memory of a lost youth. It wasn't just a movie about teenage rebellion. It was a visual poem about the things we can never fully understand or hold on to. This film was more than just a debut. It was the first sense of her filming style and of everything she would do next. The soft focus, the pastel palettes, and that lingering atmospheric silence. By the early 2000s, Sofia had moved beyond protecting girlhood and began exploring something more universal, the profound loneliness of being a person in the world, in the film Lost in Translation. It wasn't about a grand romance, but instead, it explored a deeply intimate, largely platonic bond. Shot as a dreamlike, atmospheric drama, the film follows a fading movie star, Bob Harris, played by Bill Murray, and a young philosophy graduate, Charlotte, played by Scarlett Johansson. Together, they navigate the quiet weight of loneliness and culture shock in the middle of Tokyo. Coppola wrote and directed this fleeting connection that was seen in a series of neon-lit karaoke outings and late-night hotel bar conversations. It's a film that proves sometimes the deepest bonds are found in the silence of shared isolation. And it was Lost in Translation that won Sofia an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, proving that a film with very little talking could say everything. Then came Marie Antoinette. If Lost in Translation was about the emptiness of a hotel, Marie Antoinette was about the emptiness of a palace. With Marie Antoinette, Sofia created a pastel-hued reimagining of France's last queen, treating the 18th century court like a contemporary coming-of-age story. Starring Kirsten Dunst, the film is less a political biopic and more an intimate portrait of a teenage girl trapped in the rigid, isolated world of Versailles. Sofia famously broke the rules of the period piece, infusing the setting with modern energy. The soundtrack featured 80s post-punk from bands like New Order and The Strokes, and she even tucked a pair of lavender Converse sneakers into the background of a shoe montage. Inspired by the colours of lingerie macarons, the film's candy-like palette won the Academy Award for Best Costume Design. But most importantly, Sofia chose to end the story not with a guillotine, but with the quiet destruction of Marie's bedroom, focusing on the loss of her private world rather than the violence of her public end. It was her most controversial work, and arguably her most misunderstood. Critics at Cannes famously booed it, calling it self-indulgent. But Sofia wasn't trying to make a history lesson. She was making a film about a teenager who just happened to be the Queen of France. If Marie Antoinette was a riot of colour and sound, her next project was its silent, contemplative shadow. With Somewhere, Sofia returned to the in-between moments and the halls of the Chateau Marmont. The film follows Johnny Marco, played by Stephen Dorff, a hard-partying actor living an emotionally empty life at the Chateau Marmont. His routine of drinking, parties and hollow excess is suddenly interrupted when his 11-year-old daughter, Cleo, played by Elle Fanning, is left in his care. Surrounded by the hotel's lonely luxury, Cleo's presence forces Johnny to confront the emptiness of his lifestyle, turning a simple stay into a slow-moving re-evaluation of his entire existence. There are long, unbroken shots where seemingly nothing happens, forcing the audience to sit in that same restless silence. It was Sofia at her most minimal, stripping away the pastel sweetness of her previous work to show the grit underneath the glamour. Then came The Bling Ring, perhaps her most cynical film. Here, she traded her signature soft focus for the harsh digital glare of 2010's celebrity worship. It's a satirical crime drama exploring the bling culture of the mid-2000s, centred on a group of fame-obsessed teenagers who use the internet to track celebrities and rob their homes. Dubbed The Bling Ring by the media, their story allowed Sofia to take a stark departure from her usual style. Instead of capturing a quiet, internal mood, she was capturing a shallow, neon-lit frenzy, a world where the crime was just a means to get closer to the celebrity glow. But it's her most recent work, Priscilla, that feels like a striking return to her narrative roots. Based on the memoir Elvis and Me, the film focuses strictly on the perspective of a teenage Priscilla, played by Kaylee Spaney, and her life inside the gilded cage of her relationship with Elvis, played by Jacob Elordi. It's a story told entirely through Priscilla's eyes, capturing the isolation of a young woman living in the shadow of a legend. And interestingly, the Elvis Presley estate didn't approve of the project, denying Sofia access to both his music and the Graceland property. But this exclusion ultimately worked in her favour. It forced her to lean into a more intimate, dreamlike aesthetic, using a soundtrack by her husband's band Phoenix to evoke the era rather than relying on Elvis's recordings. Throughout her career, Sofia has been a masterful observer of gilded cages, using her unique perspective to look inside the lives of women who are often seen but rarely heard. While her earlier films often ended in mystery or tragedy, Priscilla feels like a new chapter. By the time Priscilla drives through the gates of Graceland for the last time, Sofia gives her protagonist something her previous characters rarely found: a clear, decisive exit. It's a powerful evolution in her work, showing a woman finally stepping out of the frame and into a life of her own. Sofia Coppola's work has always sparked debate. You'll often hear critics dismiss her films as frivolous or vacant, basically arguing that she's too obsessed with prettiness and privilege to tell a real story. To them, it's all surface-level style with no substance. But for her fans, that style is the substance. Sofia uses mood and silence to map out those messy, internal feelings that dialogue just can't catch. Whether it's a pair of Converse in 18th century France or the neon blur of the Tokyo night, she reminds us that style is never just extra, it's a language. She taught a whole generation of viewers that mood can be a plot point, and that a soft focus lens can be just as powerful as a loud script. Sofia Coppola hasn't just made movies, she's created a mood that we're still living in today, and I for one can't wait to see what Sofia does next.